Yeah, thanks, William. Thanks for having me. My name is Patricia. I'm the Research Repository Advisor in Library Services here at the University of Birmingham, which is a bit awkward to do this remotely when I'm in the same city, but that's how schedules work out today. And I can just, second so much of what Mary has been saying about all the issues on around research data services, but I'm going to try and focus really on the digital preservation bit of it and how we try to cost it. Again, the overview of what I'm doing is like obviously providing a bit of a context of how research data management is set up at the University of Birmingham, and then our attempts to cost how for digital preservation going forward. So the University of Birmingham in July 2016 has put up an open data program, which basically looked at all the aspects of an RDM service, had membership from the planning office, IT services, library services, and research support services. So they are the people who are putting in the grant applications here at the University of Birmingham. Basically what Mary said, you need to have all the people at the table if you want to provide a proper service. And the program was designed for 3 phases and in separate work packages, basically because there were previous attempts at the university to get a service set up, and everybody just felt overwhelmed by everything is connected to everything, so they didn't know where to start. So the approach taken in 2016 was then to break it down into work packages to make it more manageable and hopefully see more progress and services in some areas. So the project work packages that we were working on were like setting up an institutional repository, looking at the storage we provide for research data. We were setting up and customizing DMP Online. There was a sprint on advocacy and training, and there was one on rewriting the policy. We had one in place for quite a bit before that, but that was basically copied from a different institution and never actually contextualized to University of Birmingham services, and that's what we've basically done in that area. And for this talk, the most interesting bit is basically looking at the storage, because there in phase 3 we thought we should look at digital preservation. So storing files are fine, but seeing as we're all trying to comply with funder mandates that say this all needs to be accessible in at least 10 years from now, we are pretty sure that that's not necessarily the case for all the files. So we definitely should look at digital preservation and what we might need to do in that area. So what we've done is we've attempted our first business case in January 2017. That's basically when those projects around the institutional repository and the storage had looked at the options currently out there, and we picked a provider for a data repository, and we wanted to integrate with Archivum to replace the local storage we had in IT services, which back then was only 32 terabytes and fairly old. So we just thought we'd go with the gold standard for storing data. We make a business case for Archivum, so we costed for 100 terabyte and the pay-as-you-go deal, so JISC for 5 years to start with, and we put this wonderful number of £181,000 on our business case as budget for storage, and we went to the Central University Research Committee and said, this is what we want, please give us money, and it got rejected. And the main reason why it was rejected is because we were queried like, why 100 terabyte, is this much needed? How much data do we actually anticipate to have to store for the long term? And basically our reasoning behind that wasn't seen as robust enough, which to be honest, it probably wasn't, because we have no idea how much data we need to store. We basically just thought 1,000 or 100 terabytes should be reasonably a good starting point and last us long enough, but that wasn't good enough to actually get any money. So we were sent away basically with a task to figure out how much research data does exist on campus, how much is created, where is it stored, and how much of that do we anticipate to come into our long-term storage that has to be actually paid for through that project or that a similar business case. And I think, as most people in the room probably will know, answering that question of how much data you might potentially get is incredibly difficult. So we have a few starting points. One of them is our colleagues in IT services run a survey every 2 years. So for this question, that's the 2017 data, because it just closed the survey 2 weeks ago and haven't actually managed to analyze all the data. So I can't give you the most current numbers on this, but we basically asked our researchers, and of whom about 300 have answered how much research data they're actually going to create as part of their project, and how much of that is working data that they have in their active storage and need access to all the time while they're working on the program. So we don't have that many projects that really create huge data sets, which is good, but there's also a reasonable high number of people who actually do not know how much research data is created as part of the project. And if the researchers don't know, it's really, really hard for us to make a business case based on anything. We also asked them about what our colleagues in IT services call publication status. So that basically is how much of that data that you have in your working storage do you think will underpin a publication, and this thus falls under one of the funder policies, that it has to be shared and archived in the long term. So again, here, not that many huge data sets that should be coming our direction or in the direction of any other data repository. And again, a reasonably high number of people who actually don't know, which is slightly scary, maybe. Yeah, let's go with that. One of the things that we can obviously look at is the institutional repository. So that bit of the business case was successful, and we have set up an institutional repository that's been up and running now for about a year. We call it a repository of last resort, so we refer for people to actually go to their discipline-specific repositories to submit their data there, because they're way better set up than we are. So at the moment we have just around 150 records in there, and that's currently using up just a tiny amount of storage if you look at the overall picture. In terms of digital preservation, we're currently not enforcing any policy that makes that easy going forward. So we do have a mix of proprietary files and things in open file formats that we're reasonably certain that we can preserve going forward. But there's, at the moment, we're basically trying to get as much in as possible without putting up too many barriers that might make it difficult for academics to engage. And the eData repository is free for our researchers to use. I think technically our policy says that if your data set is larger than 1 terabyte, we won't charge you, but as you can see from the overall storage, what really ends up in there is really small data sets and small files. In terms of cost recovery, our colleagues in IT services do provide costs that they ask our researchers to put in their grants. So this is the bit for the long-term storage. At the end of the project, there's also separate costing for working storage that can be put in. But basically, at the moment, up to 20 terabyte is free, and that comes out of some ring-fenced storage that the colleagues in IT services have. I think they have a yearly budget of around £100,000 that they can buy tape storage from or keep that service running, which is they get out of the indirect costs. So at the moment, I checked, and no one is actually having any data deposited in there that they would charge for. So it's highly unlikely that there's going to be a lot of money coming in from the storage on that end. Some numbers from the latest IT survey. We asked our academics why they don't actually cost that in their grant applications, and well, the answers are reasonably what you would expect. The things that IT provide is enough. They use their own storage. I don't really want to know what that is and how well that's backed up. Some of them say they're actually gonna use a subject repository in the end, so that's good. The scary part again is that I have not actually thought about that fact that storage might cost something, and I'm not entirely sure what all these other reasons are. So basically, that's the bit of data we have around that we could use to make a second business case, and yeah, it's not that much. In parallel, we've set up a specific digital preservation working group in library services that brings together our colleagues in special collections who are looking at digital preservation as well, and we're basically agreed that we join up all the repositories we're running, so at least the data repository, not necessarily the archive that IT services provide, but we at least in those areas look at some systems for or solutions for digital preservation together. So what the working group so far has done is created a digital preservation policy for library services that potentially, if there's interest, could be scaled wider for the university. We do have vendor presentations for preservation systems scheduled for June 2019. So we actually agreed on a spec for a preservation system and not the storage, but something that we really want to look at as the proper preservation part. And we've basically put our requirements together. We realized that we don't actually have expertise on the digital preservation end. My research data management knowledge only gets you that far, but if you want to do proper digital preservation, that will need a dedicated post. So we have a job description that is approved, but there is at the moment no money yet to basically be able to recruit someone. So what we're overall looking at is these a few gigabytes in each of our repositories, spread across our publication system, our thesis repository, the research data repository, and all of the material that we currently have in our special collections. So this is what we would be looking at in the first round, and then it's subject to discussion and further developments on campus if the research data bit actually has to scale to cover the full 128 terabyte of storage that technically IT services are currently providing on tape. Yeah, I think that's it. That's what we've done so far at the University of Birmingham. We're still not entirely sure where that business case is going to and who would have money to pay for it. So that will need careful consideration again, so it doesn't get rejected like our first attempt did. So basically, we're currently trying to find a magical pot of money that we can ask for. So thank you for listening, and let me know if there are any questions.